In the summer of 1974, the world of mountaineering was shaken by a story unlike any other. At the heart of it was Elvira Shataeva, a passionate alpinist, a leader and a woman determined to prove that courage and endurance know no boundaries. She led an all-female Soviet team into the Tian Shan Mountains, aiming to conquer the mighty peak of Lenin, standing over 7,000 meters tall. What began as a bold and inspiring ascent soon turned into one of the darkest tragedies in mountaineering history. Cut off by a raging storm, surrounded by ice and wind, the women continued their climb, not knowing that nature was preparing to test them beyond human limits. And our video disclaimer. This is a true story of courage and loss in the mountains. It may be emotional to hear. Everything is going so well, we're even disappointed with the route. Reported over the radio the leader of the women's mountaineering group, Elvira Shataeva, on August 2nd, 1974. But just 5 days later, a terrible tragedy occurred on the slopes of the Pamir Mountains, resulting in the death of all 8 women. This story truly shocked the whole world. Here's how it happened. Women's mountaineering in the USSR was developing just as rapidly as men's. There weren't as many women among the athlete mountaineers as men, but over time they were steadily earning respect. A pioneer in this field was a simple Moscow girl, Elvira Shataeva. In fact, her acquaintance with the mountains began through an acquaintance with a person, that mountaineering instructor Vladimir Shataev, who soon became Elvira's husband. They got married, and very quickly mountaineering became their shared passion. Together with her husband, Elvira conquered all the highest peaks of the USSR. There was nothing left to conquer. Soviet climbers were practically not allowed abroad at that time. It seemed there was no more incentive. The roof of the USSR, a peak communism, had been conquered in 1971, and there was nowhere else to grow or develop. That's what anyone else might have thought, but not Shataeva. She decided to climb all the Soviet 7,000ers again, but this time with an all-female group. No sooner said than done. The first goal, Peak Korzenevskaya, one of the 5 7,000ers, was conquered by the women's team in 1972. There were only 4 of them. Shataeva herself, her friend Ilsia Mukhametova, Galina Roshalskaya, and Antonina Son. The next year, Elvira organized a new ascent, this time in the North Caucasus. Mount Ushba, which in the local dialect was called the mountain that brings misfortune, also fell under the onslaught of the women's team. In 1974, as a new goal, Elvira chose Peak Lenin, the second highest summit of the Soviet Union. Among mountaineers, this peak was considered absolutely safe. In all 45 years of ascents, not a single tragic incident had occurred there. Nevertheless, Shataeva approached both the formation of the group and the preliminary preparation with great responsibility, which took more than half a year. There could be no talk of recklessness or bravado. Elvira chose the safest and easiest ascent route. In addition to the well-known Ilsia Mukhametova, her team included Nina Vasilyeva, Valentina Fativa, Lyudmila Manzharova, Galina Perekodyuk, Irina Lyubimtseva, and Tatiana Bardasheva. "I think we won't let anyone down," wrote Elvira in one of her letters. "The ladies coming along are good." And regarding the easy, almost leisurely route, she said the following as a parting word to the group. "We won't imitate anyone, and we won't make it a race. We will create our own style of climbing. A female style, because we should not and cannot climb the way men do." On August 2nd, Shataeva's group set out for the ascent. The weather was beautiful, and the athletes moved easily across the snow-covered slope. At that time, several male groups were also on the peak, and the women deliberately moved slowly so as not to be accused of climbing in someone else's tracks. On August 4th, the weather began to deteriorate. It started snowing. This was a hindrance, though still manageable. But Elvira was actually pleased with the worsening weather. The weather is getting worse. It's snowing. That's good. It will cover the tracks. So there will be no talk that we are climbing in someone else's tracks, she said during a radio communication with the base. On August 5th, the group reached its goal. They made it to the summit of Peak Lenin, which they reported to the base. After receiving congratulations and wishes for a successful descent, the athletes began preparing to head back. By the evening of the same day, the worsening weather escalated. The snow turned into a blizzard and the wind grew stronger by the hour. Shataeva made the decision to delay the descent and wait out the storm. Visibility is poor, 20 to 30 meters. We're uncertain about the direction of the descent. We've decided to set up tents, which we've already done. We set up the tents in tandem and settled in. We hope to scout the descent route once the weather improves. From Elvira Shataeva's radio message. But on the morning of August 6th, things got even worse. The wind showed no signs of calming, zero visibility and a raging wind. That's what was happening that morning on the summit. For the first time, Shataeva addressed the base leader during a radio session with a question. "What should we do, Vitaly Mikhailovich?" Vitaly Mikhailovich Abalakov, the head of the mountaineering camp, was an experienced athlete, but even he understood that the women were trapped. Descending in such conditions was tantamount to suicide. But staying at 7,000 meters was also not an option. After a maximum of 2 days, the human body begins to die from lack of oxygen. Sending help to meet the women was out of the question. In such visibility, any ascent would have meant certain death for the rescuers. Radio negotiations continued throughout the day. By evening, Shataeva made the decision to descend. "We would like to leave the summit and go down. We have lost hope of a clearing, and we just want to start, most likely, the descent. Because it's very cold on the summit, very strong wind, it's blowing very hard." From Elvira Shataeva's radio message, August 6th, 1700 hours. The women began their descent. But around 2 in the morning on August 7th, the strong wind on Peak Lenin turned into a real hurricane, deadly and destructive to all life. The group's morning message was terrifying. The hurricane tore apart the tents, carried away personal belongings and stoves, and also Irina Lyubimtseva had died. "In 15 minutes we won't be alive." At the base below it became finally clear the group was under mortal threat. Several groups of mountaineers, without any coercion, set out in the terrifying hurricane to search for the women. These were not only Soviet teams. French, English and Japanese climbers also headed upward. But they could do nothing. The Japanese, who climbed the highest, were forced to return after 3 of their climbers suffered frostbite. At 2 o'clock, Elvira Shataeva got in touch. Elvira Shataeva VO. 2 have died, Vasilyeva and Fativa. Our belongings were blown away. 5 of us share 3 sleeping bags. We're freezing badly, we're very cold. 4 of us have severely frostbitten hands. The base replied, "Move downward, under no circumstances stop or lose heart. If you can't walk, just keep moving, stay in motion all the time." And that was the only help the base could offer at that moment. "We're very cold, can't dig a cave. Nothing to dig with. We can't move. The backpacks were blown away by the wind. Shataeva at 15:15. Galina Perekodyuk was speaking. At first there was silence on the radio, then crying. Finally, through tears, Galia said, "There are 2 of us left. We have no more strength. In 15 to 20 minutes we'll be dead." After that, Galina pressed the radio button 2 more times, but no one came on the air again. It was all over. When the hurricane subsided, the first to find the bodies of the dead women were the Japanese mountaineers, but they counted only 7 people. Elvira's husband, Vladimir Shataeva, who led the search party, continued to believe until the end that his wife had survived and did not lose hope of finding her. But it was in vain. The entire team had died. The 8th woman, Nina Vasilyeva, was found in a torn tent beneath the body of Valentina Fateva. The women were buried where they were found, in 2 mass graves dug in the snow. But a year later, after negotiations with relatives and sports officials, Vladimir Shataeva decided to bring the women's bodies down. It was a very risky operation. No one had ever carried 8 bodies down from such a height before. It took 14 days and was carried out perfectly. Elvira Shataeva, Irina Lyubimtseva, Ilsia Mukhametova, Galina Perekodyuk, and Valentina Fateva were buried at the foot of the mountain in a meadow of Edelweiss. The bodies of Lyudmila Manzarova, Nina Vasilyeva, and Tatyana Bardasheva were taken home by relatives. After the death of Shataeva's group, women's mountaineering in the Soviet Union was banned for many years. It was allowed to have no more than 1 woman per team, and this rule lasted almost until the collapse of the Soviet Union. And the group of Elvira Shataeva remained forever in the history of mountaineering as the first women's team to conquer Peak Lenin. In the